Recognizing the member for Surrey Cloverdale.
Oh, that goes over here. Okay. Thank you, Madam Speaker. It is my pleasure to rise in this House to provide my comments on the throne speech. Before I go there, we're nearing the 1-year anniversary of Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine, and I'd like to thank those British Columbians who have welcomed those fleeing Ukraine into their homes, communities, and places of worship. British Columbians are also helping support those who have stayed to defend their country. Having Ukrainian roots, it just tears me apart to watch what's going on in a land where some of my relatives still stay. Before I continue, I'd like to acknowledge that my office is located on the traditional unceded territories of the Coast Salish people, specifically the Kwantlen, Katzie, and Semiahmoo First Nations. I'd like to thank them for allowing me to live, work, and play on these shared territories, of which I also had the privilege of raising my 2 children and currently 3 grandchildren. Madam Speaker, my riding of Surrey Cloverdale has a significant portion of lands inside the ALR, which separates Cloverdale from the Fleetwood and Clayton areas. We've heard from some members that it takes up to 10 hours to drive around their ridings, and from some members that it may take up to 10 minutes to walk their ridings. Madam Speaker, I can tell you from experience, for me to ride my mountain bike around the perimeter of my riding, it takes me about 90 minutes on a good day. My riding is also home to a couple of very spectacular events. One will be coming up on the May long weekend, which is the Cloverdale Rodeo. And equally as important in my riding is the Canada Day celebrations that are held in Cloverdale, which are some of the largest Canada Day celebrations in all of Western Canada. Madam Speaker, I'd like also to take this time to thank my constituency assistants for the work that they do in my office. Those are our true frontline workers. They're there to answer the phone sometimes at a person's worst day of their entire life. It is not often that they're phoning the constituency office to let us know what a great day that other person is having. Denise Blundell, she's been there since from the very start. She provides the constituents with the information that they're looking for, and she also provides the levity of the office that's required on some of the darkest days. And I thank her for that very dry sense of humor. Nat Sabrawal also brings her experiences from other offices, which are great assets to those that are in there. And recently, we've added Shelley Wooden, who brings her managerial office expertise to us, and it has been a great addition. I make no mistake, Madam Speaker, those 3 women run that office. They are definitely, at times, the boss of me. I'd also like to thank Maddie O'Neill-Johns, my LA, for keeping my legislative calendar up to date at certain times with the changes that are coming. I'm sure it feels like herding cats at times. And Madam Speaker, that's not because there's anything wrong with cats. I'd rather herd dogs, though. Madam Speaker, in the throne speech, there's mention of working on new models of addiction care. And here's where I'd like to take a little time to talk about the work of the Select Standing Committee on Health, which dealt with the overdose crisis. The report that came out last year was supported by all 3 parties, with a clear understanding that the toxic drug supply and the overdose deaths that are associated with this toxic supply need all 4 pillars to address the crisis. The pillars are harm reduction, prevention, treatment, and enforcement. We've heard from the members opposite that decriminalization of small amount of narcotics, less than 2.5 grams, will not be effective. However, that's not the same story that was heard at the committee stage. Decriminalization of less than 2.5 grams of narcotics does a couple of things. It prevents the person who uses drugs from having their drugs confiscated when it's less than 2.5 grams, which would have put that person in a position to acquire new funds to purchase their next dose. The other part of decrim that would see contact with a law agency becoming an outreach role by leaving some contact information regarding treatment and recovery. Madam Speaker, to be clear, decrim doesn't change the laws around trafficking, which will remain exactly the same. Other new initiatives, including having supports embedded inside of the emergency room. The committee heard from persons who experienced overdoses. What we heard is when a person calls out for help, they want it now and not a week from now. The people who end up in an emergency ward at St. Paul's due to an overdose will now have the ability, should they want it, to reach out for help with their addictions. Connected to the emergency room will be a room that can begin a treatment plan right away for that patient. This program, if successful, could be replicated in other ERs across the province to serve those when they want treatment and they can get it in a timely fashion. Madam Speaker, that committee heard it from recovery coaches. They heard it from other peer supporters, and they all agree that if they embed themselves into the medical system can help those people in their recovery. Madam Speaker, we're keeping costs down. During a time when inflation and interest rates are problematic for some British Columbians, our government is finding ways to keep more money in their pockets. We've done this in many ways. We've restructured our public insurer and put ICBC back on solid footing and provided people with some of the lowest rates in Canada. Basic car insurance rates have been frozen for the next 2 years. The recent BC affordability credit can see as much as $410 back in the pockets of a family of 4. In December of 2022, childcare costs were reduced again. This reduction can save a family as much as $550 a month for each child, or nearly $6,000 a year in savings. And this has been life-changing for many parents. I, for a fact, know that my daughter and her partner and the 2 kids, with these cost savings, can actually now go out and enjoy a movie and the meal that comes with it without having to worry about where the childcare costs are going. Madam Speaker, these cost-saving measures built on the work that the government has done over the last 5 years. Initiatives as reducing ICBC rates on average of $490 per year per driver. We ended the bridge tolls in Metro Vancouver, and we eliminated medical premiums, which was the largest middle-class tax cut in a generation. We can see all around us in British Columbia as we've been hit with one climate disaster after another. It's clear that we need to be better prepared in the future. That is why a new Ministry of Emergency Management and Climate Readiness has been created. I can tell you that when I was a structural firefighter and I was deployed to the Okanagan to help out with wildland fires, I gained a new kind of respect and admiration for the wildland firefighters. The work that they do is unnerving, somewhat dangerous, and very labor-intensive. I've told this story before, and I'll tell it again. And I told it to those people that I was working with those 2 days in Strawberry Hill, just outside of Barrier. I would trade the scenario of going into a burning 3-story wood-framed apartment with a half a tank of air, rather than spend another shift in the wild, trying to protect properties while an inferno burns just around the corner. And Madam Speaker, I am not sure if anybody's ever been in the forest when that happens, but it is loud and scary. And I give kudos to those people protecting the lands and property that they do. What this new ministry in place will do, you'll see in the spring session, a new Emergency and Disaster Management Act will be introduced to better improve British Columbia's ability to respond and recover from whatever might be in store. We are investing today to build a stronger tomorrow. The throne speech speaks to building hospitals, schools, childcare centers, roads, and public transit that makes us stronger. And Madam Speaker, when I speak to public transit, I'm talking about the SkyTrain that's being extended from Surrey City Centre all the way to downtown Langley. Madam Speaker, the SkyTrain has not moved one single inch for the last 30 years, and it's this government that's taken ownership of the project. And on the build from King George Station to downtown Langley will be in one phase rather than two phases, as it was previously announced. This one-phased approach will deliver transit to Langley sooner and cheaper than a two-phase project. With the extension of SkyTrain down Fraser Highway, many commuters will finally be able to get out of their cars. Not only will SkyTrain make it easier to commute, will also be faster to get downtown. Not only will SkyTrain stimulate ridership, it'll stimulate denser housing projects around the stations. Higher densities will lead to various options of housing projects that will be near these transit hubs. Madam Speaker, when we talked about what hospitals and schools and childcare, I want to talk about the first new medical school in Western Canada in 55 years to be built at the SFU Surrey campus. This school will create more opportunities for future doctors to learn, train, and stay in a practice in the communities throughout BC. With the new hospital set to open up in 2027 in my riding of Surrey Cloverdale, some of those future doctors will be able to stay and practice in a hospital that's only 20 kilometers away from the school in which they graduated. Madam Speaker, now let's talk about the hospital that's coming to Cloverdale, and that's why my constituents are so happy with it coming to our riding. Now, Madam Speaker, land was set aside for a second hospital in Surrey over 15 years ago, and it was about 5 kilometers away from the hospital lands we have in Cloverdale today. 11 years ago, the leader of the official opposition, who was finance minister at the time, announced the sale of the land that was supposed to be used for a second hospital in Surrey, as he said that the land was surplus and sold the lands at a $3 million discount. Now the leader of the opposition is saying he'll stop the second hospital that our government is building. He said he would stop it and move it to another location. The location that he suggests is the middle of a large section of ALR lands, with the nearest residential lands approximately half a kilometer away. Madam Speaker, this does not sound like the proper location. The people of Surrey, and specifically of Cloverdale, are happy with this project, and they're happy where it's going to be located. The RFP process is nearing completion, and after these are reviewed and assessed, the contractor will be awarded. Construction will begin in the middle of 2023, and the hospital is expected to be open for patients in the summer of 2027. Madam Speaker, the hospital will have 168 inpatient beds, 5 operating rooms, 4 procedure rooms, an emergency department, 55 treatment spaces, medical imaging department, 2 MR machines, and 3 CT scanners. The hospital will also have childcare on site for nearly 50 kids. And the new regional cancer center that'll be located at the hospital will have an oncology ambulatory care unit, 50 examination rooms, 54 chemotherapy spaces, functional imaging including PET and a CT, a cyclotron, and room for 6 linear accelerators for radiation therapy to provide care for people diagnosed with cancer. Madam Speaker, I do not know what a linear accelerator is. I know that there's 6 of them going there, and I know 6 is better than 5, but maybe we can get 7 when this is all done. Madam Speaker, I want to go back and speak about the 54 chemotherapy treatment spaces that will be part of this regional cancer center. These 54 spaces will bring the total of chemotherapy treatment spaces in the city of Surrey to 90. My math indicates it's not quite triple, but it's more than double the amount of chemotherapy spaces that are in the city right now. And what this means is that there will be less people who will have to make a longer commute to other cancer treatment centers in Metro Vancouver. Madam Speaker, I'd like to share the story in the House today regards to cancer treatment and the occupation of firefighting. As some of you will know, I've spent over 30 years in the fire service in Surrey, and the very first day that I walked into a fire hall, I met my very first fire crew. And to say that it wasn't intimidating, this is back in a time where handlebar mustaches, soup strainer mustaches, they were all the rage, and these people were intimidating like you would never believe. I was filled with excitement and the prospects of running into a burning building instead of out of it were high on my list of things that were exciting. And Madam Speaker, I can tell you today that excitement is gone. Every single one of those people that I met on my very first day have all passed away from cancer. That cancer is as a result of their occupation as a firefighter. And it's important to recognize, Madam Speaker, that both sides of the House have provided presumptive cancer legislation for firefighters. And this allows those members who are being diagnosed with cancer, a presumptive cancer, their ability to concentrate on their treatment and recovery rather than concentrating on a WorkSafe BC appeal. For years, Madam Speaker, I was the voice of people who were no longer around, and I fought for the compensation to the families in recognition of the life they gave to the citizens of the municipalities they served in. I often think of those people who are no longer with us, as I unfortunately shared the same workplace exposures and hazards as they did. While I may be a walking, talking, ticking time bomb waiting to be diagnosed with cancer, Madam Speaker, having a regional cancer center in my riding is greatly welcomed by myself and my constituents. The hospital is a major development for the whole area, not only for the community of Cloverdale, but the surrounding region. The Surrey Hospital and Cancer Center project is supporting people with better access to health care and reduced surgery wait times through an emergency department, medical imaging department, surgical suite, pharmacy, laboratory, and academic space. The hospital will shape the area into a vibrant community like we see in other hospital districts in British Columbia. I can't wait to see how the lands will be developed around this community icon in the not-so-distant future. And Madam Speaker, with the hospital coming, with SkyTrain coming, and the other things that are coming to the Surrey-Cloverdale area, jobs are job one in everybody's mind that's there. I've had the pleasure of attending KPU in the area, looking at their trade school that they have and their Red Seal program. And when you talk to the youth that are graduating from that school relatively close to now, they're looking at all of the opportunities that they can have to be inside of their neighborhood and working local. When I tell the story that I've never driven across a bridge to go to work, and how many of them want to have that same experience of simply just having that short little commute to the job that we have. And Madam Speaker, before I close, I want to go back to some of the topics that we've talked about around decriminalization and some of the comments that come forward. The member for Surrey White Rock was there on the committee along, the riding escapes me, and Peace River, there we go. And we heard the testimony from all of those people. And one of the things that we heard that was important for us as a committee to consider and to put in a report, it was around destigmatizing, to allow these people the right to live without the stigma that follows them, without that shame that was following them all over. And now we're hearing from time to time from some members opposite about decrim and how it won't have anything to do. And they start listing off the drugs that are being applied, whether or not it's cocaine, whether or not it's meth, whether or not it's heroin. But they're listing off the drugs that are there. And Madam Speaker, I can't help but think that that furthers the divide in the stigma of being a drug user. So I would just ask the people of this House, when they talk about decrim, who are the people that it affects the most? And just because they may not be in our backyard, they may not be a neighbor, they may not be a friend, and they may not be a relative. But what we are doing in the bottom line is keeping these people alive until a point in which they will reach out and seek help, and they can start moving themselves down the pathway of recovery. Madam Speaker, we've heard this throne speech described as lackluster and dull by some of the members opposite. And it may be when you compare it to a rocket launch or to last week's Super Bowl. And yes, thank you, Kansas City. When you take a longer look at the throne speech, you see that it signifies the beginning of this session of Parliament. You'll see how the words describe what government has done and what government will be doing to make British Columbia a better place to be. And with that, I'm going to take my seat. Thank you.
Thank you, member.